In the family restaurant, every heartbeat screams my desperate demand to prove I'm more than a legacy, even as I lock eyes with him, a wealthy heir shrouded in secrets and smoldering desire. In that charged moment, as hints of a ruthless loyalty test swirl around us, I confront a devastating truth. To be seen, I may have to shatter everything I once believed in. Chapter 1. Whispers at the Family Table. Ava's world began each morning not with the exuberance of possibility, but with the measured rhythm of tradition. The restaurant, a family institution passed down through generations, stretched its warm, welcoming arms to those who needed solace and sustenance. As she set the table with care and aligned the polished silverware, her thoughts constantly wrestled with the legacy of expectation. Every plate washed by her diligent hands, and every dish prepared in the simmering kitchen, was both a tribute to her family's history and an unspoken challenge, proved that she was more than just a shadow of her ancestors. Inside the establishment, the air was rich with the smell of garlic, basil, and roasted meats, a testament to recipes honed through decades. The walls of the dining room, peppered with faded photographs of smiling patrons and captured memories of celebrations, bore silent witness to countless family moments and whispered secrets. Amid the clatter of busy lunch service and the hum of conversation, Ava moved with deliberate grace, determined to honor every tradition while secretly longing for a chance to define her own destiny. As Ava balanced the competing demands of family loyalty and her own inner yearnings, a curious tension began to stir early one fateful afternoon. In the midst of refilling a chair for an elderly couple and double-checking the orders at a bustling table, her gaze caught a glimpse of an unfamiliar figure outside. Drawing back the restaurant's front door to welcome the departing coolness of early spring, she found herself face to face with a man whose presence was as unexpected as it was compelling. He stood on the cusp between the familiar and the foreign, the embodiment of the world beyond the worn wooden beams and checkered tablecloths of her life. Tall, with eyes the color of storm-tossed seas, he possessed an effortless charm that made her heart skip in quiet rebellion. His suit, impeccably tailored, marked him as someone of affluence, someone whose life was written in the bold strokes of high society. In that brief moment, as their eyes intersected over the threshold, a spark ignited, a whispered promise of mysteries yet to be unraveled. Ava's heart pounded in her ears. She was well accustomed to the murmurs of patrons celebrating milestones and the clinking of glasses during busy evenings, but nothing she had ever experienced matched the electric energy that darted between them. For an instant, the lively chatter of a restaurant faded away. The bustling atmosphere receded like distant echoes, leaving only the silent, charged air between the two of them. Who was he? And why did every fiber of her being urge her to lean closer, to dare a small, knowing smile? Her internal monologue, always a steady guide, now wrestled with both curiosity and caution. In the safety of her own thoughts, she acknowledged the contradictions, the allure of stepping into a world far removed from the hearty simplicity of family recipes, versus the weight of her deep-seated duty at home. The man's presence was as enigmatic as it was captivating. His subtle nod was an invitation to a story that promised both danger and delight, a narrative written in glances and nuanced gestures rather than in spoken words. Refusing to let her rising expectations spoil the rhythm of her day, Ava continued with her duties. Yet, even as she carefully plated the evening's special, her mind wandered back to that fleeting encounter. Each step she took, from the sizzling of a pan to the rhythm of laughter shared between longtime staff, carried an undercurrent of anticipation. This man, whose name she soon learned was Daniel, seemed to carry secrets neatly tucked beneath the veneer of polished wealth. And in a twist of fate, he soon became an integral guest during dinner service. When Daniel returned, the restaurant seemed to hold its breath in the space between orders and introductions. He slipped into a quiet corner by the window, his presence as quiet as it was magnetic. Ova found herself drawn, her curiosity piqued by the subtle play of emotions on his face, a hint of sadness behind the charm, a glimmer of longing that resonated with her own hidden vulnerabilities. As she gathered his order, a simple dish recommended by her mother's well-worn cookbook, her hands trembled slightly, defraying the rush of adrenaline that surged within her. Every detail counted. The way he observed the room without looking away completely, the careful tilt of his head that almost seemed to ask silently for trust. In the midst of her shift, the usual chaos softened by familiar routines. Ava gathered fragmented moments of looks and smiles that spoke louder than words. As the evening deepened, so did the layers of tension between them. Their interactions were marked by subtle compliments and fleeting glances. A nod from him when she passed by his table. A brief moment where conversation almost bridged the gap between their two worlds. There was a shared understanding, an unspoken acknowledgement of hidden depths in both their lives. Daniel's reserved humor and knowing eyes hinted at a life that was as complex as it was dangerous, yet his smile held promises that were tender and genuine. Throughout the night, as the sounds of clinking cutlery and murmured conversations filled the air, Ova's internal struggle persisted like an undercurrent. She yearned to be recognized not only as the reliable daughter who upheld her family's traditions, but also as an individual capable of carving her own destiny. Daniel's presence offered her a dangerous taste of that possibility. His enigmatic charm subtly disrupted the careful balance of her carefully constructed world. She was beginning to see that the whispers around the family table were not always about the mundane details of recipes or the predictable rhythm of the day. Sometimes they hinted at secrets too compelling to ignore, secrets that might lead her away from what she thought she knew. In the final moments of the evening, as the last patrons bid farewell, and the soft glow of the setting sun painted the dining room in wistful hues, Ava found herself lingering near the window where Daniel now sat quietly. The air was heavy with the unspoken promise of future meetings, of shared confidences waiting to be exchanged between the comfortable clamor of familial duty and the thrill of newfound possibility. His eyes caught hers once more, and in that silent dialogue of glances, she sensed not just attraction, but the potential for a profound connection. A relationship that, while initially unexpected, might soon become the key to unlocking both of their hidden truths. In that transient moment, as she carried the weight of tradition, and the shimmer of hope mixing beneath the surface of her heart, Ava realized that life was not a simple recipe with predefined measurements. It was a blend of ingredients, each chosen both out of loyalty and rebellion, necessity and desire, crafted over time until even the smallest spark could ignite a lasting flame. And as the night settled over the family restaurant, whispers at the table promised that the story of her life was about to take a significant, irrevocable turn. Chapter 2. Shadows of the Past. The late afternoon light filtered through the curtains, casting shadows across the living room floor, echoing the quiet turmoil between them. The protagonist sat by the window, eyes on the dancing dust motes, waiting. The air was heavy with unspoken words, every tick of the clock amplifying her heartbeat. He arrived quietly, his presence both comforting and enigmatic. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said softly, his voice tinged with secrets. She shook her head, whispering, "I'm glad you're here." Though their bond deepened with every interaction, their pasts threatened to shatter their fragile intimacy. They settled on the worn sofa, words spilling out in confessional murmurs. He recounted fragments of a shadowed life, burdened by expectations and painful choices. "There are pieces of me I've locked away," he confessed, eyes distant. The protagonist reached out, her hand on his, offering silent assurance. She was determined to understand the man behind the title. His vulnerability was electrifying, knitting them closer with each word. "A time existed," he said slowly, "when I wasn't burdened by expectations. I was free, but freedom had a high cost." His words stirred something unresolved within her. She felt his pain, demanding acknowledgement before healing. The conversation turned to his hidden life, a fortress and prison. He revealed a past scandal that could jeopardize his family standing and their connection. "I never thought you'd see me like this," he admitted, torn between duty and desire. In a charged pause, she leaned in, their lips meeting in a tender kiss, a communion of acceptance and shared burdens. It was a promise of solace through connection. Locked in that embrace, they acknowledged the complexity of their realities. The protagonist, haunted by vulnerability, and the heir, caught between family demands and heart's desires. The sound of distant voices reminded him of his inescapable duties. "I wish I could set aside all shadows," he murmured. She responded with quiet strength, "We can let it shape us positively. There's beauty in dark moments." Their confession and commitment pulsed with raw energy. The path ahead was fraught with challenges, but the present offered hope, a hope that together, they could face their pasts and heal their souls. As twilight draped over the city, they knew the present was a brief interlude. The lingering taste of their kiss reminded them that love involved accepting shadows and basking in light. Embracing their story's complexity, they realized their journey was poignant and undeniably real. Chapter 3: Midnight Confrontation. Under the shroud of a moonless night, the old family restaurant stood silent, its stoic walls holding secrets deep within. The corridors, usually abuzz with clinks of cutlery and soft laughter, now echoed with the steady, deliberate steps of Elena as she made her way through dimly lit tables. Tonight was different. It was a secret meeting, a moment lightened with long-suppressed truths and an imminent revelation. Inside, the tapestry of soft shadows and the lingering aroma of age would set the stage for what was to become a turning point in both their lives. Julian, the wealthy heir burdened by expectations and hidden scars of the past, had agreed to meet at the symbolic heart of his family's legacy. He stood near a large mirrored window, its reflective surface a silent witness to all that had transpired between him and Elena in previous encounters. There was a tense vulnerability that contrasted sharply with his usually confident demeanor. His eyes, dark and searching, betrayed the weight of secrets he had long fought to bury. Elena's heartbeat quickened as she approached. Every step resonated with her inner turmoil, a mix of hope and indignation. The past moments of tenderness they had shared were now tainted by the looming specter of betrayal. "I deserve to know what you've hidden," she thought fiercely, every fiber of her being prepared for an unvarnished confrontation. Julian greeted her in near-whispered tones, his voice edged with regret and an unspoken invitation to pour out unvoiced questions. "Elena, you came," he murmured, eyes shifting between guilt and sadness. The words, though simple, spoke volumes about the labyrinthine emotions that had brought them to this late hour. In the background, the portraits of his forefathers seemed to watch in silent judgment, as if the expectations of past generations were woven tightly into the fabric of this very moment. Elena's response was measured yet urgent. "Julian, I cannot stand in the shadows of your silence any longer. I need to know who you truly are, if I am to trust you. If we are to move beyond this painful attraction, every layer of deception must be laid bare." Her tone held a raw, almost heartbreaking intensity, a declaration that echoed beyond the physical space into the depths of their shared destiny. The confrontation began in earnest. Julian confessed that what he guarded weren't mere family secrets, but the guilt of a legacy riddled with sacrifices and painful choices. He spoke in a low, trembling voice about the loyalty test imposed by his lineage, a test meant to bind him forever to a family code that demanded unwavering allegiance at the expense of his own desires. It was a ritual of truth and betrayal. Tonight, the restaurant had become more than a backdrop. It was the arena where his allegiance to a family custom was measured against his growing conflicted love for Elena. As he revealed fragments of the past, a hidden investment that was tainted by ethical compromises, decisions made under the pressure of preserving a reputation, and the loneliness that had, over time, corroded his core, Elena's eyes flashed with both indignation and tender sorrow. Every word peeled away the layers of the carefully curated image Julian had long maintained. The confrontation was not just an exposé of secrets, it was a test, one that demanded total honesty, loyalty, and the courage to accept one's own vulnerabilities. With each admission, the atmosphere grew thicker, charged by the mingling of desire, betrayal, and the promise of redemption. The loyalties of family and self, of duty and heart, collided violently in the space between them. Elena's voice, slightly trembling yet resolute, cut through the heavy air. "I've stood by you, accepted your silence and the hidden parts of you, believing that your secrets were simply scars of a painful past, but now I need you to be unguarded. I need you to truly show me the man behind all these sacrifices. Prove to me that your love isn't just another duty, another burden you carry for the sake of family expectations." Her words reverberated in Julian's mind, stirring an internal conflict that had grown too large to ignore. The confrontation was raw, an unfiltered cascade of emotions, that neither had ever permitted themselves to acknowledge. He reached out, his hand hovering in the cool night air, unsure if touching her was an act of love, a plea for forgiveness, or simply an attempt to anchor the world around him. For a brief moment, the unyielding formality of the family name and legacy dissolved into the soft edges of vulnerability. It was then, amidst the palpable tension, that time itself seemed to slow. The honest, heartbreaking intensity of Elena's gaze met the remorseful, searching look in his eyes, and the ensuing silence held their combined resolve. In an unexpected yet poignant gesture, Julian closed the distance between them. Their lips met in a bittersweet kiss, a kiss that was as much an admission of their undeniable passion, as it was a mournful acknowledgment of the pain and consequences that accompanied it. It was the union of two souls, both scarred and hopeful, intertwined in a moment that promised transformation, but carried the weight of impending decisions. For those few fleeting seconds, the burdens of family expectations, the demands of loyalty, and the unspoken oath of secrecy were replaced by an intense, almost desperate need for connection, a shared belief that love could, indeed, defy even the most entrenched legacies. But as the kiss slowly ended, they parted for a heartbeat longer than there should have been, their eyes still locked, a silent vow that whatever came next, they would face it together. The midnight confrontation at the family restaurant was more than just a meeting. It was the crucible in which their true selves were forged. Elena's demand for honesty had broken through the carefully constructed facade of Julian's inherited life, igniting a spark that was as dangerous as it was beautiful. While the bitter tang of past mistakes lingered in the air, the dawning promise of change glimmered faintly within the darkness. Their shared kiss, filled with equal parts passion and pain, encapsulated the complex equilibrium between duty and desire, a delicate balance that would dictate the course of their future. As the night began to wane, and the first hints of dawn crept over the horizon, both Elena and Julian stood together in the quiet of the empty dining hall. The looming family loyalty test and the legacy that encumbered Julian's identity might yet threaten to pull them apart. However, in that charged moment of vulnerability, they had set in motion an irreversible process, a confrontation that had not only laid bare hidden truths, but had also, despite the turmoil, brought them irrevocably closer. The silent promise of a new day whispered of change, of growth, and of the possibility that the shadows that once defined them could eventually give way to the light of honest, transformative love. Chapter 4. Dawn of Acceptance. The early light of dawn filtered through the tall windows of the old manor's study, casting gentle, unassuming shadows that mingled with the remnants of last night's turbulence. In the aftermath of the midnight revelations, the atmosphere between them had shifted from brittle isolation to a cautious, nascent tenderness. As the conversation hummed quietly between the protagonists, the piercing outlines of old conflicts still lingered, yet there was a resolute determination to unbind the chains of secrecy. He sat at the large oak desk, one hand scribbling erratic notes on a slip of aged paper while his eyes, usually filled with the arrogance of entitlement, now shimmered with vulnerability. The wealthy heir, once defined solely by his lineage and the weight of family legacy, had begun to dismantle the walls built to guard his truth. It was in that quiet, early morning space that he finally set aside his carefully crafted persona and revealed the final fragments of his own concealed history, the secrets that had weighed on him like unseen chains. His voice, soft and honest, carried tales of personal sacrifice, of conflicting loyalties in a family that demanded perfection and loyalty in equal measure. The words, like scattered fragments of a painful puzzle, slowly fell into place. With an openness that bordered on raw and unguarded, he recounted moments of guilt and regret, acting against his own nature to uphold the family honor, betraying confidences out of societal expectation, and even sacrificing genuine personal happiness in favor of artifice. Each confession was a brushstroke in a painting that graduated slowly from despair to hope, as if he were confessing not only to her, but also to his own soul. The admission filled the room with a hum of gravity, where mutual recognition of scarred pasts wove together their separate journeys. Her eyes, once shadowed by the pain of perceived betrayals, now shone with a resolute light. The protagonist, who had spent weeks wrestling with her internal dilemmas, recognized the raw honesty behind his confession. She reflected on her own mistakes and the self-doubts that had haunted her. It was not about keeping score, but about understanding that their pain was part of a broader tapestry of life, a tapestry in which every frayed thread held the potential to be reborn. They sat side by side, voices mingling in a quiet dialogue that transcended words. Neither was eager to dwell on the cruel intricacies of the past now, and instead, their shared silence spoke volumes. They both acknowledged that in the crucible of hardship, a profound opportunity for growth had emerged. The conflicted expectations of their respective worlds had subordinated to a more immediate truth, self-worth. Together, the revelations forged a bridge over the chasm of mistrust that had seemed impassable just moments before. Throughout the long morning, little gestures became a language of forgiveness. A gentle touch on the wrist, as if to say, "I understand," the raised glance that held an entire conversation about regret and hope, and the soft murmur of words barely louder than a whisper, promising an uncharted future. As each secret was laid bare, the family test, a series of trials designed to measure loyalty and identity, revealed its true, transformative purpose. It was never a test of obedience, but of the capacity to love oneself and others, despite the imperfections that defined each individual. The heir's confession marked the final step in this metamorphosis, a symbolic shedding of a rigid past. The conversation naturally shifted toward the lessons learned from their collective journey. The protagonist, her emotions tempered with newfound resolve, articulated a desire to rebuild what had been fractured. Her words, measured and heartfelt, acknowledged that the journey outward was only truly complete when mirrored by a journey inward. With the painful nights now receding into memory, she spoke of emerging stronger, not merely as a lover or a confidante, but as a person wholeheartedly deserving of compassion and truth. Her insights resonated deeply, affirming her own self-worth while encouraging him to embrace his layered identity, a blend of inherited duty and personal desire. Outside, the early morning bustle of servants and the awakening of the house signified the start of a new day. The symbol of a new beginning was palpable not just in the reborn camaraderie, but in the subtle shift in the cadence of their hearts. Each had found solace in the other's struggle and the strength to move forward. With each secret unveiled and every new promise embraced, they gradually learned that acceptance is rarely instantaneous, but a process that unfolds with patience and courage. Near the window, where the soft glow of sunrise brushed against the worn velvet sofa, their eyes converged in a moment of complete understanding. There, with a gravity that was both innocent and brave, he moved closer, his hesitant fingers tracing the line of her jaw, a gentle gesture replacing the earlier clamor of adversity. In that quiet exchange of warmth and acknowledgement, past grievances dissolved into the background, replaced by the earnest hope of possibility. The ease of the gesture, unadorned yet monumental, spoke to both of them, that what lay ahead was a promise handwritten by their healed hearts. In a silent, unwavering motion, their lips met, an affirming, passionate kiss that encapsulated the essence of their collective metamorphosis. It was as if every secret, every bit of hurt, every lesson learned all converged into that single, transformative moment. Their embrace was both an end and a beginning, a declaration that they were ready to step from the shadows of their former selves into a radiant new chapter where love, trust, and self-acceptance reigned supreme. The dawn continued its steady ascent, bathing the room in an ambience that was tender yet distinctly resolute. In that serene hour, the sting of midnight confrontations, the sharp edges of bitter truths, and the harsh judgments of the past were replaced by an earnest desire to nurture a future built on vulnerability and hope. Amid the lingering whispers of former grief, they found a quiet sanctuary where personal growth was celebrated, differences were resolved, and the two of them, each flawed and luminous, chose to move forward together. As the day unfurled, they rose from that intimate embrace, not with the promise of immediate perfection, but with the quiet understanding that every step taken, every secret unearthed, and every tear allowed to fall had paved the way to a serene horizon. In this quiet yet potent morning, acceptance had not only dawned, it had blossomed into a life-affirming journey that promised, with every heartbeat, that the future held more light than darkness and